second.
And I was not impressed.
Hold on a second. And if a group of people would have come together and tried to create it, which is what the Quran claims as well, they could not have reproduced it. Now hold on a second. Now I, through my own investigation, now you could say that's subjective, came to the conclusion through reasoning and through this evidence that I was convinced that this Quran could not have come from a human being in the 7th century. Now what are those evidences? One of them, I believe, is the linguistic constructs of the Quran. Let me explain what those are. Hold on a second. Look, I'm going to produce for you. Hold on a second. Before you nod your head and before you are already convinced that it doesn't exist, at least hear me out.
Because I don't speak Arabic.
No, it's not about. It's not about Arabic. Look, it's not. No, it's not. This man, for example, one of the evidences that I cite often is a man called Professor Raymond Farin, a white man, American, studied in Georgetown University in America. He decided that he was going to do his major in classical Arabic poetry. Now, us Asians often go into accountancy, we go into like becoming a doctor, you know, we're very lazy when it comes to these very obscure, distant type of activities or learning processes like languages and foreign languages. Anyway, he decided that he was going to study Arabic poetry, classical Arabic poetry. Somebody said to him, why don't you look at the Quran? Because the Quran, even though it's not poetry, but it actually rhymes and it feels very much like poetry.
Where there's rules, don't run, don't walk, don't chew.
So he studied the Quran.
And somebody
He learned Arabic,
whatever.
Classical Arabic. He studied the Quran without anybody speaking to him about Islam. He accepted Islam on the evidence that he found about the way the grammar is constructed within the Quran. He said it was impossible for a man or a group of men to have orally transmitted this in this way. Impossible. And so he accepted Islam. Now hold on a second.
A few problems.
Yes.
First of all, poetry has a structure.
Yes.
It's in the nature of poetry.
Yes.
So it's going to be a structure there anyway.
Yes.
Also, people see patterns.
Yes.
But even if they don't exist.
Yes.
There's always patterns you can find.
Yes.
So if you're not careful, you can find loads of patterns, inevitably. So it's been done.
I'll tell you why your argument is. I'll tell you why you don't.
It's a case of numerology.
Yes.
And somebody looked at the book Moby Dick, a book about a whale, and they found loads of structure in it.
Yes.
It's not a poetry book. They found structure in it.
Yes.
Numerology. Because inevitably you find some structure. So it's very possible he fooled himself to find these things that aren't really there.
You see,
don't matter, or they're by accident.
With all due respect, you don't. With all due respect, a thesis, years of work, you have an opinion about it, without even seeing what he was actually saying, what he was talking about.
Well,
you heard the word structure, and from that you inferred what he's talking about,
yes.
which you don't know, and you've made a conclusion.
it's
One of the things, no, but what I'm trying to explain to you is it's a lot more complicated than that. Clearly, yeah, a lot more complicated. Trust me. If you have time, and if you are truly interested, then I would advise you to at least look into it before you come to a conclusion. His example is about the second chapter in the Quran called Surah Baqarah. 286 verses, revealed over 10 years, orally, no editorial process. A verse comes down, something happens. Some man behaves in a certain way, and a verse is revealed. The Prophet utters the verse immediately. The companions memorize the verse. The Prophet tells them, this verse is pertaining to this chapter. This verse is pertaining to that chapter. It comes after this verse. This verse comes after that verse. 286 verses, revealed over 10 years, while simultaneously other chapters are being revealed. Verses are coming down, and he's telling them where to slot those verses. That's the first thing. The Surah Baqarah, orally transmitted, without any editorial process, and he finds that the first section of the chapter and the last section of the chapter are linked very closely. The second to last, the third to last, the fourth to last. The fifth one has a unique message in itself, tying in the entire surah, the entire chapter. Within that chapter of 286 verses, Allah uses the word middle once. I have chosen for you the middle ground. In other words, don't go to extremes. Don't go to extremes on this side. Don't go to extremes on the other side. He uses the word once, middle. Road, middle ground. Where does that verse appear? On the 143rd verse of the 286, right down the middle. Within that chapter of Surah Baqarah, there are other concentric patterns of other verses or groups of verses that are also concentrically linked together. Now, the complexity within the structures he found to be so complex that for an individual to claim that this was random, or somehow by memory he constructed this over 23 years, he was convinced that that was impossible. And so on that basis alone, he accepted Islam. Now, to you, that might not be a convincing argument. You might say, well, that's all a coincidence. But this is an academic who studied it for, hold on a second, for many years, and upon that he's convinced of that structure.
First of all, 143 is not the middle of 286. You can't have a middle of 286. It's 285. That's the middle.
Is that really your point?
That's one point, yes. Another point is you've got 114 verses.
But you see, look,
114 chapters. If one of those has the word in the middle,
are you really going to apply that argument to me?
Yes.
That the 143rd verse is not the middle of 286, and you think that's therefore it's not in the middle?
It's not. The problem is, with all these things, with numerology, you can hunt around these little patterns. You find them. You always find them.
You find certain patterns.
Always find them.
You find certain patterns. I accept that. But it's the very complexity of those patterns and the numeracy of those patterns that on balance of probability render random events. Hold on a second. Let me finish. Random events constructing that complexity on balance of probability, that's what makes it impossible. It's not about finding the odd pattern here or there. It's the frequency of those patterns and the accuracy of those patterns that render it impossible on the balance of probability. Look, my friend, if it was anything else I was convincing you about, not God and not religion, you probably wouldn't have a problem with it. The problem with people is they only have a problem with this weight of evidence when it's about God and about religion. Anything else, TV, what operation to have, which is the best surgeon to save my life. We have no problem with finding out those people on the balance of probability. We're convinced this surgeon has got a 100% record with over 10,000 patients for this operation. You'll go in there relaxed. And if there's a guy who's had 10 operations with 5 failures, you're going to be petrified. Why? Because your rationale tells you on balance of probability, this is dangerous and that is a sure thing. But when it comes to God, my friend, when it comes to Islam, when it comes to religion, people want to deny it because, oh, it's 143rd. That's not in the middle because it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. This is an academic who spent years.
And how many educated academics are there? How many Hindu academics? How many Muslim, Buddhist academics?
The point is this.
There are lots of academics of all religions.
Then look at the evidence. Look at the
people who have left Islam. These academics who have left Islam.
Look at the evidence that they provide for leaving Islam.
Yeah.
And then look at the evidence of those who say they were wrong because of X, Y, and Z. And then as a rational human being, weigh up the evidence and go wherever the evidence takes you. Somebody joining something or leaving something does not validate or invalidate that subject, does it? That's not a logical or rational argument, is it? That's just looking for excuses, not to even look into something.
I've looked into it.
No, my point to you is this, though. But your arguments that you apply to trivialize something are just superficial. They don't mean anything.
I don't know how good that is.
Well, then the job for
But I
you.
do know how bad some other
Okay,
quality arguments
but that's a very good comment you've just made there, you see. I don't know how good that evidence that you have provided me today, Abbas, is. So what hold on a second. So what I'm going to do, as a balanced, rational, reasonable human being, is I'll at least look at the evidence and I'll see what it has to say and I'll make my own mind up as to whether it is in fact extraordinary or it's not extraordinary. Look, one of the other things you have to understand is this. When the Quran is revealed, as I said to you, if I said to you tomorrow, I'm a prophet, follow me, fast, pray, don't have alcohol anymore, don't gamble, don't do this, you'd say, you're a lunatic, man. You need to go to a mental asylum. Right. But here comes a man in the 7th century, peace be upon him, who says exactly that to the people. You know, we know that there's a lot of, hold on a second, we have a big drinking culture here. Everyone, we produce alcohol, but from tomorrow, guys, no more alcohol. Oh, and you know what? We're big gamblers, and we're big womanizers. No more women until you get married, and no more gambling. Oh, and by the way, you got to be hungry for 30 days at least in the year. No food, no drink, no nothing. In the heat, in the sun. Oh, and by the way, the pagans that want to fight you, take up arms and defend your right, defend yourself. If it's your brother attacking you, you have to defend your life and defend your family against him. And suddenly these people who had this tribal connection, this lifestyle.
I just had one thing,
Yes,
sorry,
yes.
to his list. One of the key things for the people of Mecca was the pagans, was the statues and the idols.
Yeah.
The whole city of Mecca's commerce was based on idolatry.
Yeah.
The fact that the tribes would bring their...
This is how they made their money.
This is what.
Oh, yeah.
So
All
you're not
the-
going to. So he's going into a society as well, telling them how they make their money. Can't do that.
It's all wrong. You can't do that anymore.
It's like going into the Chamber of Commerce and saying no more interest, mate.
So all these idols that bring in all these thousands of people, all the caravans, trade routes,
So the key question has to be: is this?
and all this power that all the Meccans have because of those idols. You know what? We can't worship those anymore. Destroy all of them. You have to believe in the unseen God,
So the
the
question
one
is,
that you can't see.
So the question is-
And now the question that has to be asked.
Why do they believe him?
Right.
There's also going to be lots of people in Mecca who are good people who are going to realise that this pagan stuff is basically a money-making scam, which it probably is. So there's lots of people who know that. Lots of people making money out of it know it.
The point.
So the
No, that doesn't apply.
Look,
That
the-
doesn't
the-
apply.
And also
the
be
point-
aware
That doesn't
this is
apply.
vaguely
That doesn't apply.
disagree.
No, what you just said doesn't apply. I'll tell you
That's why some
Because
people are following it.
I'll tell you why it doesn't
Because they
apply.
know
I'll tell you why it doesn't
it's
apply.
wrong.
Because it's the people themselves bringing their idols. Yeah.
No, some of them will be good people who will know
No,
that it's wrong.
you missed it. You missed the point, sir.
People will know it's
You missed the
wrong.
point.
and
You missed the
against
point.
that.
You missed the point. If you're saying to this, if this is what you're saying, is the Meccans put all these idols in the Kaaba and told the people, listen, you should come and worship them, your point stands, okay? But it was there were surrounding tribes who brought their idols to the Kaaba to worship, to do their pilgrimage. And whilst they were there, obviously, the Meccans, who were merchants, would trade with them. And merchants would come, and this was their society. All right. Now the question has to be asked. Sorry, please.
That's okay. No, please.
Too much.
No, that's fine.
I'm going to get out. And go
No. You contribute.
no. But the point here is
fine.
this. All those things, you listed all the things, isn't it? You can't womanize, you can't drink, you can't do that. And you can't do the thing that makes you money. The question needs to be
There's
asked.
lots of people in Mecca.
No, but the question
Most
needs to
did
be
not
asked.
Let me address that, actually.
The question needs to be asked. Why did the people believe him?
They didn't.
They didn't.
Most didn't. A few did, most didn't.
Right. Who believed him?
A few people did, friends,
Why then?
because there's always people who know it's a con.
What's the
Everybody's
con?
mixed.
What's the con?
It's a money-making scam.
No, but I'll tell you why you're wrong there as well, though.
Paganism,
I'll tell you.
it's whole money.
So
it's whole paganism.
tell me the other.
People will know.
Who's the people?
The people.
Because you're making all these
Some
assumptions.
people, look, everybody's different.
Do you have any evidence of what you're saying?
No, Hamza. I'll address that as well. Look, you're saying that there are some good people
Yeah.
who would recognise that this man is saying something that's good and they will adhere to it, right?
Well, especially on the pagans.
That's what you're saying,
No,
right?
that's not what he said.
No, that's what he's saying. That is what he's saying.
Paganism is
Okay,
wrong.
even there you're wrong. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why you're wrong. Because alcohol wasn't forbidden for those people, even though ones that were good.
I'm not saying about
No.
I didn't raise that up.
Womanizing. womanizing was not forbidden for those people, even though they were good. They might have been good people, but they were womanizing, drinking. My point is that in today's modern day intellectual age, when humanity knows that alcohol is damaging to my body. Hold on a second. You're not listening to my. Listen to my argument.
They always do.
Listen to my argument first. Even today, where humanity has now been convinced that there is more harm in alcohol than there is good for my body, yet intellectuals, scientists, politicians, doctors, surgeons still drink, and many of them drink to excess.
I don't.
Hold on a second. Even though they know that physically it's damaging to them.
But lots of people
Now, in those days, my point to you is this. Your point is flawed because, I'll explain to you why. Because even the people, like for example, Abu Bakr, the second Caliph, Umar Khattab radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him. He loved good clothes and he loved that lifestyle. What makes him then accept a religion where now he gives away all of his wealth? He has 14, 15 patches on his clothes covered in mud while he walks into Jerusalem when the keys are handed to him in Jerusalem. What makes a man who lived in extravagance all his life, and at one point he goes to kill the Prophet Muhammad because he says that this man is creating rifts between our close community, our sects, and so on the way to killing him he accepts Islam. Why? So there must have been something profound, not just some kind words, that transformed a barbaric society that were killing one another for feuds that often lasted for generations, that drinking for excess, womanizing to excess, burying their daughters alive because they were regarded to be inferior. Within a century, they come to the doorsteps of Spain, to the east, to China, and to Africa. And today, 14 centuries later, the mark of what they did all those centuries ago is still permeating through our society today. The science, the technology. You know, you go, for example, to the United Nations on human rights. There are statements there that Umar Khattab radiallahu anhu said that have been immortalized. A man in a desert who says a message to people whose words, their words now, not even his words. How can you enslave a man that was born free? Umar Khattab radiallahu anhu said this. Now the human, it's used in the United Nations as something that he's regarded even by Western academics. A Caliph, not even the Prophet Muhammad, who's recognized as number one influential in the world by Western academics. He's recognized as 52 most influential human being that ever existed on earth. What transformed a people, nomadic, living a medieval life? What transformed them? And this is something that, as a rational human being, to just argue that some good people would have accepted him and that would have transformed the whole nation, and within a century it would have reached Spain to China.
He implied there was pockets of people. No, 1 second,
Hold on now.
Because you're
Let him talk.
His implication wasn't that.
Let him talk.
It's a worldwide religion. Paganism doesn't work. The Greek gods don't work, the Roman gods don't work, the Egyptian gods don't work, all these local gods, even Hindu gods, don't work worldwide. One God works worldwide. This is why the Roman Empire took up Christianity. It just worked better than the pagan religions. So Islam is sort of an improvement on Christianity, which don't have the Trinity. That's the reason it became successful, is it works better than paganism.
Do you have any historical evidence to support your claim? Because I have some that counters your claim completely.
So what he's claiming, you see, there was pockets of people in Mecca already waiting to throw paganism away.
Yes.
Right. So what evidence do you have for that?
It starts with the Christians there.
No. What evidence do you have?
Because people are good. I look at people.
I'm not interested in your opinion.
You want me to think everybody's the same.
I'm not interested in your subjective emotional opinion. I'm not interested in your emotional opinion.
Okay, hold on a second.
I'm interested in facts here.
Is
there any evidence you
okay.
have? One second. Is there any evidence you have that supports your claim that there were people living in Mecca who were waiting to throw idols away? Do you have any evidence for that?
No.
So it's just your opinion?
I have evidence to counter your claim, actually. I'll show you evidence that counters your claim. You have no evidence, but I have evidence that counters your claim.